Released in late 2020, the PlayStation 5 has taken a good few years to really find its footing with consumers. Hindered by high demand and low availability for the first half of its life, we've seen very few next-gen exclusives actually hit the console compared to any other generation of gaming. But it's 2025 now, and we have a PlayStation 5 Pro model already, and there are finally more and more games coming out that won't work on PS4 anymore, including the upcoming GTA 6. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and with the PS5 approaching 5 years old, I think it's a good time to ask the question, is it still worth buying in 2025? First, let's go ahead and break down the different models of PS5 because there is a few of them at this point. Number one, you've got the original PS5, which I have here, and there's also a digital version with no disc drive. You might still find these on occasion being sold brand new, but there is an abundance on the used market if you go that route. And if you are buying new, you're probably going to get number two here, the PS5 Slim from 2023. The Slim is functionally the same as the original PS5 consoles, just a bit smaller, with the digital edition coming in at typically $450 and the console with the disc drive costing $500. Though you'll see deals and bundles here and there cutting these prices down a bit. Generally, I would say just get the one with the disc drive. Realistically, it's not that much more, and I think it's nice to have, though you can buy a drive kit for this one for an extra $80. But if you don't have any PS4 games on disc that you might be playing and plan to purely buy everything online, then you are able to save a few bucks with the digital edition if you'd prefer. Then third, there's the newest kid on the block with the PS5 Pro, which brings a 45% faster GPU and what boils down to more consistent performance and hopefully a more stable 60 frames per second at 4K. That extra power will cost you though, with the PS5 Pro coming in at $700 and not including a disc drive at all, nor a vertical stand. You have to buy that separately now. Yeah, this price point has been very controversial, and understandably so. It's really high for what seems like not a whole lot. I'm gonna be honest, I really don't think the PS5 Pro is going to be worth it for the vast majority of people, unless you really consider yourself within the niche subset of gamers who care a lot about resolution and frame rate, but don't want to play your games on PC. If that's you, and you've got the extra money to spend, by all means, go for the PS5 Pro. But for the rest of us, I do think going for a normal PS5 or PS5 Slim just makes a whole lot more sense, given they're fully capable of playing the exact same games for significantly less money, especially if you're getting a discount or a bundle, which isn't going to be as common yet for the higher end machine. As for whether the PS5 as a whole is worth it in 2025, I would say it absolutely is. We're likely right about now in the middle of the current console generation. We're past 4 years from the PS5's original introduction, and a PS6 is unlikely to come until 2027 or 2028. I really don't think it's worth waiting a few years, especially when new games are finally now no longer coming to PS4, which you may have watching this video, and if the next generation is anything like this one, then we'll probably be seeing new games regularly continue to release on PS5, even potentially past 2030. Basically, you're going to be able to get a lot of years out of one of these $500 machines, and I think that alone makes it worth the investment. Now, whether or not this will be worth it over something on the Nintendo or Xbox side really comes down to personal preference and the types of games you prefer. I do think PlayStation makes more sense than Xbox for most people, just due to both the quality and quantity of exclusives, although we are seeing more and more Sony games eventually make their way to PC, which is a really nice trend as of late, but even then, it's not on Xbox for the most part. Like Spider-Man 2 is coming on PC, not on Xbox. The reality is, right now, Xbox just doesn't have that many new great games unavailable on PS5, and even some games like Indiana Jones that look really fun are coming to PS5, spring 2025. It might already be out when you're watching this. If you're into the more mature, adult-oriented titles, you're probably not looking at a Nintendo system, and if PC isn't for you, then I think PS5 just makes the most sense right now. And if you're one of the many people who want to play Grand Theft Auto 6 when it comes out, it's only coming to Xbox and PS5 initially. You're probably waiting at least a year for the PC version. There's really no better time to jump aboard the PS5 train than right now. So yes, absolutely the PS5 is worth it in 2025, and this will continue to be the case for likely another couple years until the PS6 rumors really start to ramp up. If you're thinking about the Pro, that's really up to you, but if you've got a PS5 already, I definitely would not bother upgrading to the slightly more powerful system. For someone who doesn't have a PS5 at all yet and has a wallet that's feeling a little too full, sure, maybe go for the Pro if you really want to, but for the most of us, I think you're probably fine just getting the regular PS5 or PS5 Slim. I'll have some Amazon referral links in the description option if you are looking to buy a PS5. Oftentimes, I find they have the best deals, although not always, so definitely don't be afraid to look around a little bit for a discount. There is also the option of the used market, which personally I would probably avoid for myself. You just don't always know what you're getting, and the prices often don't feel cheap enough compared to buying brand new, but it can be a very decent way to save at least $100, if not more, and maybe get some bundled in games or controllers in the process. The original PS5 is basically the same as the Slim, so just be aware if it's been played hard over the years, it may end up having hardware issues sooner rather than later, just like any other electronic that you're buying used. Also be warned, these systems are absolutely huge, so you'll want to make sure you have enough physical room on your entertainment unit if you're going to get one. The Slim definitely is slimmer than the original beast that I have, but any model you get is still going to be big, so you may want to keep that in mind. Now, if you are considering a PS5, there's a few more things we should discuss. The accessories and anything you might want to purchase alongside the console being number one, so let's talk about that. There's some obvious stuff like the disk drive potentially, or a vertical stand if you want that, but besides that, you'll probably want to purchase PlayStation Plus, a subscription that allows you to play online games. There are some free-to-play titles like Fortnite that doesn't require this, but most games will, and it's basically a requirement to have PS Plus if you enjoy multiplayer titles. Even games like Elden Ring, where it's not really necessary, it is nice to be able to see player messages and the like. Sony recently revamped PlayStation Plus, so it's a tiered subscription service now, and it's a bit needlessly complicated, but for most people, all you'll need is the cheapest option in PlayStation Plus Essential. This gets you online multiplayer, some monthly games which you can download and play for free as long as you're subscribed, some discounts in the PlayStation Store, and cloud storage, which is pretty handy. For this, you're looking at $10 per month, $25 for a 3-month subscription, or $80 for a full year, which is probably the way to go. And I do think this really is the tier to go for almost anybody. But if you like burning money, you've also got a couple more tiers, the next being PlayStation Plus Extra, which is $15 a month or $135 a year. This gives you, on top of what we talked about, a limited selection of games that you can play for free. If there's a few titles in there you think you would play, then this might be worth consideration, but ultimately, this is nowhere near as robust as Xbox Game Pass, and in my opinion, really isn't worth so much more money over the previous tier. A lot of the games available can often be found for cheap, either used or even just on discount whenever sales roll around. Then you've got the PlayStation Plus Premium at the highest tier, costing $18 a month or $160 per year. This gives you an even larger game catalog selection, including a bunch of classic titles, as well as some titles that you can cloud stream. This will particularly be cool if you have the PlayStation Portal, which is basically a streaming tablet for your PS5, but is now receiving support for cloud streaming games without the need for your PS5, so you just need PS Plus Premium for it. Unless you do have a Portal and that appeals to you, I really don't think this seems worth it at all. We're talking about $160 a year versus $80 a year. If you were to go for the lower tier that gets you online multiplayer, which is probably what you actually want here, it seems like a lot of cash spent for not that much benefit, unless there are some games in the catalog you really want to play, but don't actually want to buy, even on discount. So that's PlayStation Plus, and while I think the Essential tier is worth it if only for online multiplayer, that's probably about it. Though you've got options if they appeal to you. Next thing you might want to look at buying for your PS5 is going to be accessories like perhaps an extra controller. The DualSense controller is easily, in my opinion, one of the best controllers ever designed for any console, not only for how well it fits in the hand, but also the haptics and adaptable triggers that makes these far more versatile and immersive than what you can get from Xbox. Unfortunately, not that many games properly utilize these features, but something that's pre-included like Astro's Playground is a great example of how cool they can be, or of course the new full-fledged Astro Bot, which released to critical acclaim in 2024. It's sort of hard to describe, but the way the vibrations work is just amazing. When you skate on ice, it actually feels like you're skating on ice. When you pull the trigger, there can be actual tension, making it more difficult to pull, adding this whole new layer of immersion to gameplay. Again, most games really don't take advantage of this, and it can be killer on the battery life, which frankly isn't really that great to begin with on the DualSense controllers. I'd recommend getting one of these handy controller docks. They're very convenient for charging, or you can just plug them in via the USB-C port, which works as well. In terms of ergonomics, I find these controllers quite comfortable, and I think most people will, but it's something that's more up to personal preference and how your hands are sized. You do still have the middle touchpad like on the PS4 controller, and I will say I do think these are a pretty big upgrade over the DualShock 4 gamepads, feeling much more substantial and comfortable, at least in my hands. You've got a built-in mic, which is kind of cool and can be muted with this button. You can also hold down the button to quickly mute the controller and vibrations fully if you ever need to. There's a headphone jack as well, which is convenient, and there's plenty of gaming headsets out there, including some from Sony if you're playing a lot of multiplayer multiplayer games with voice chat. Discord is on PS5 these days too, so a good headset might be worth purchasing. But back to the controller. The buttons and joysticks feel good, although having myself been using these controllers for 4 years now, durability is definitely a bit sketchy. There's nothing as bad as Joy-Con drift on the Nintendo side, but drift certainly can happen, or for my own controllers I find some of these buttons have gotten just kind of sticky feeling, where I have to press them pretty hard to activate them properly, and they just don't feel that good to use anymore. You can help mitigate potential problems by being careful, not eating with these or having greasy hands or anything like that, but I consider myself pretty careful, and I've still had some issues with a couple of them, so just keep in mind it can still happen. The controllers are still very usable, but sometimes I'll hit the X button or square button and nothing happens, which can be sort of brutal when playing a game like Elden Ring where every input counts. PS5s do tend to only come with a single controller unless you're getting a bundle, so if you ever want to play any couch co-op multiplayer games, or at least want a controller you can switch to if your current one dies, a new DualSense controller will run you around 75 to 80 bucks. That's US dollars, though you might be able to find a discount if you look around a bit. I'd also recommend the media remote for 30 bucks if you do a lot of video streaming through your console. I think it's a worthwhile investment for the convenience. If you're really a pro gamer and want to take your games as seriously as possible, you could look at the DualSense Edge controller, which is basically Sony's Pro controller, costing a wild $200. That's the same price as a PlayStation Portal for some perspective. I have not spent the money required for one of these, and I'm not going to, but they're apparently very good, as you would expect for that price point. You get some customizability and extra input options with paddles and the like, so again, if you've got some cash to burn, why not? But for most people, I would not bother. Now this all being said, I do think having at least 2 controllers is nice, so you can swap between them. Again, battery life isn't great on these. You probably won't need more than 2, even if you do want to play some couch co-op multiplayer, just because unfortunately there really aren't a whole lot of games coming out that actually support multiple people with multiple controllers playing on the same TV. If you want a console to play with family or friends in person rather than online, you should really go look at the Nintendo side. The days of split-screen Halo or Call of Duty are long gone, unfortunately. So that's the controllers, and there's a few more potential additional purchases you may want to consider. I know, it all adds up quickly, and we haven't even discussed the games yet. The PS5 may not seem that brutally expensive, around $500 US, though it's certainly not cheap, but I would expect to pay a lot more than just that when everything is said and done. One major concern to be aware of is the storage situation. The PS5 comes with an 825GB SSD, which is super fast and basically eliminates loading times, but the actual usable space is under 700 gigs, and games these days take up a ridiculous amount of space, which means that without upgrading storage, you're likely only going to be able to have so many games installed at once. Of course, you can delete games and re-download them later while not losing save data or anything, but it's an annoying process, and if you don't have a reliable internet connection and plenty of bandwidth, it may not be that viable an option. The PS5 Pro does have 2 terabytes, so for some people that alone might make it worth it to go up to the Pro, since buying an SSD isn't exactly cheap. Some games aren't too bad, but most will cost you anywhere from 50 gigs to sometimes even over 100, and so doing the math, you'll see it doesn't take too long for your hard drive to fill up. The solution here is either, again, deleting and re-downloading games, or you can go out and get an additional M.2 NVMe PCIe Gen 4 SSD. These are not cheap at all, but they are relatively easy to install and probably worth it for the convenience. If you want to be sure the SSD you're getting will work on the PS5, you can get an officially licensed one, although this isn't strictly necessary to do, as long as you're making sure what you're getting is fast enough. Oftentimes these Amazon listings will include works with PlayStation 5. Again, there's a bunch of Amazon referral links I'll have in the description, so feel free to check that out if you want to see an example. Now, even after all this, if you would like to spend even more money on your PlayStation 5, fear not, because Sony's got you covered. We already mentioned briefly the PlayStation Portal, but yeah, it's a $200 streaming tablet with 2 halves of a DualSense controller stuck on the sides. Kinda cool, but it requires a solid internet connection in order to stream your PS5, and it's a bit of a disappointing device in my eyes. But if this appeals to you, it is a sleek device, and with the cloud streaming options now if you have PlayStation Plus Premium, it is more robust than ever. And again, so long as you have that reliable internet, it should make for a smooth portable gaming experience akin to the Nintendo Switch or Steam Deck. Just keep in mind you can stream your PS5 to your phone for free. You'll just want to connect a controller via Bluetooth or get an accessory like this, since touch controls quite frankly suck and aren't worth using. If you're into virtual reality, we also have the PlayStation VR 2. This came out early 2023 and is quite similar to the first generation for PS4, just more powerful and built for PS5. Yeah, I know, in-depth explanation there, but that's essentially what this is. It's quite straightforward, and while the normal price is $599, $450. This thing definitely does go on sale, with even while I was writing this, the headset being priced at $350 on Sony's own website, likely because not too many people are buying these. And why are people not buying these? Well, unfortunately, there's really not a whole lot of games these days coming out for PSVR with any consistency. The real issue here is that while there are a handful of games that do a great job of implementing VR and make it feel amazing and immersive like Resident Evil, it's too often more of a gimmick than anything else, and because the user base is relatively small, there's little incentive for developers to actually make games for the headset. You can also play PSVR games that were made for PS4, which does expand the library a bit, but overall I don't think this is going to be a worthwhile purchase for most people. It's easy and convenient, at least, since it works with the PS5 that you assumedly already own, but even then I'd probably be personally looking at a Meta Quest or something, if only for the fact that it's wireless, but PSVR, it's an option if that's something you're into. So okay, we've covered a lot here: PS Plus, controllers, accessories, storage, PS Portal, and PSVR, as well as the consoles themselves. This is all fine and rather important to know going into buying a new gaming system, but there's an element we do still need to discuss that really ought to make or break whether or not a PlayStation 5 or any other console is going to be worth buying for you as an individual, and that's the games and how the console performs playing those games. In the 4+ years since it launched, the PS5 has become rather infamous for not really having games. And this is true, but only partially. The PS5 has had plenty of games released for it, but the vast majority have also come to the PlayStation 4, a machine that released originally in 2013. It's actually sort of ridiculous how long developers have been supporting the older hardware, and while this trend has lessened recently, it's still prevalent, with even Call of Duty Black Ops 6 coming to PS4 and Xbox One, which just feels absurd. Now, if you're still on the last generation hardware, particularly a PS4 Pro or something more capable than the original PS4 ideally, because that thing is old. In any case, if you're on the PS4, then having games still releasing for you definitely won't seem like a bad thing, and it isn't for those owners, but it has been for the early adopters of PS5, as it's holding the gaming industry back. Games are being built with last generation systems in mind, and so even though graphics will look better on the newer hardware, they still need to limit how far they can go with these newer games so that the PS4 is able to run them. But mind you, that's my perspective as someone who's owned a PS5 since 2020. The good news here is that if you don't have a PS5 yet, this is the best time to buy one, because the next-gen exclusive library is finally getting larger, although it's still pretty limited. There's a Wikipedia article for PS5 only games, and here it is. Yeah, that's it! Now, in fairness, there are games that were here and have since come to PC or are going to soon, so this isn't really a fair list per se, but it's still pretty shocking how little games are purely PS5 exclusive. Even so, if we expand our sights a little bit, there are plenty of great titles you might want to play on PS5, and even in cases where games did come to PS4, the experience is going to be far smoother and better on the newer system. Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, Last of Us, Horizon Forbidden West, Astro Bot, Ghost of Tsushima, the Uncharted Collection, and so on and so forth. Plus all the best and most popular titles of the current generation, like Helldivers 2, Elden Ring, Metaphor ReFantazio, whatever it is you might play. Those are just a few games I was playing in the last year. Even Palworld's on PS5 now, hard to argue with that. While the graphic jump from PS4 to PS5 isn't anything mind-boggling, where you'll really feel the improvements I think come in both the higher resolutions and better frame rates. I'd almost always recommend using the performance mode in most games, which can still be a bit hit and miss depending on the title, but typically offers 60 frames per second, which for me at least feels a lot better to play with for most games. I did actually enjoy Spider-Man 2 at 30 frames per second with the high fidelity mode, but generally I would opt for performance over some extra pixels personally. And while some games are kind of inconsistent with this, like Jedi Survivor was awesome, but it had a lot of frame drops when I played it even on performance mode, the PS5 is powerful enough that outside of a few exceptions, the vast majority of games feel really fun and good to play on here. And thanks to the SSDs, rather than the slow physical hard drives of old, load times are crazy fast. We've even seen some games like Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart really showcase how amazing this tech can be, loading in and out highly detailed worlds like it's nothing. Not having to wait on a loading screen for 5 minutes to get into the game, and then have to wait another 5 minutes after you immediately die. The lack of loading times these days is easily one of the best benefits of the current generation of gaming. Of course, I should mention GTA 6 once again, since it's going to easily be the biggest game of 2025, and it will be playable on any PlayStation 5 system. The best experience will definitely be on PS5 Pro, but I'm fairly confident Rockstar will ensure it's a smooth enough experience across all the systems. I mean, Red Dead Redemption 2 ran fine on the PS4 at 30 frames per second, despite still to this day being one of the best looking games ever made, quite frankly. And hey, that's another big thing with the PS5. All those PS4 games you've played in the past or perhaps missed out on are playable on this system. If you have your discs still, you can use those, or you can download basically any PS4 game off of the PlayStation Store. I've probably put as many hours into PS4 games on my PS5 as I have actual PS5 titles, or at least close to it, and why not? There are so many great games from the past decade, and having a console like the PS5 that can play so many of them guarantees there's always something for you to jump into when you're bored. And so with that, I think we've about reached the conclusion of this video. Is the PlayStation 5 worth purchasing in 2025? Absolutely, and right now is in fact probably the best possible time to jump aboard if you haven't already, whether you're buying the PS5 Pro, the PS5 Slim, or even an original PS5 off of the used market. While gaming may not always feel the same as it used to, and the pricing of these consoles and accessories can feel really high and even outrageous at times, games always seem to be getting more expensive too. With the PS5, you're looking at an investment into a machine that, if you're like me, you'll inevitably spend hundreds of hours on over the span of many years until whenever the PS6 might drop. So why not get it now and start enjoying these great games? Again, in the description I'll have links from Amazon to the PS5 and various accessories if you're interested, but that's about it from me. If you found this video helpful, please hit that like button and consider subscribing if you're into tech content. Thank you so much for watching. I am Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.